Wayne Doorband here for the biweekly NTP CEED webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Hi everybody, Wayne Doorband here from Northern Colorado, and we're here for our Economics in Action webinar that we do on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. We are so excited. We have amazing guests with us. Actually, a friend of mine that it's always fun when you have friends that you can interview. And Aja Duniven is an amazing businesswoman and person, and you're going to enjoy a lot of things that she's going to talk about. I do want to give a couple of announcements. One, this is one of those times, a few times it happens during the year when there's actually 3 weeks between our webinars. So we'll do one on the first and third Wednesdays. So this is the third Wednesday. There'll actually be 2 more Wednesdays before we do the next one. So there'll be a couple of week break before we do our next one. We actually are having a couple of different candidates for our next webinar. It's very likely that it'll be actually one of our business partners that we're doing some things with in a really exciting area. Probably agroforestry, a guy named Mark Shepard, who's really well known on a worldwide basis to be an expert in that area. We haven't firmed that up yet, but it's likely that Mark will be who we talk to. So again, sit back, ask us some questions. You see you've got a screen over there where you can be asking questions in the chat. I've got it set on the chat right now on my screen. Aja can just keep talking as I ask questions. I will ask her your questions if you put them there. Those of you that are online on Periscope, just to do the same thing, just put questions on, and Deb will let me know if you've got questions. So, with no further ado, let's get started. Aja, how you doing today?
I feel great. Just got back from a good vacation up in the mountains, and the aspens are changing up near Idaho Springs, so that was so needed, you know, to rest.
Already? Is that a little early? I was thinking into September. It seems like maybe they're a little early.
Yeah, you know, I was surprised they were already starting to shift, but gosh, every time they do, I love getting up in the mountains because it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, as I said, we're friends. We've known each other for several years now, and we've had a chance to chat about a lot of things, including the global peace train that we're going to talk about, or you're going to talk about here today, which is, I think, just an exciting business that you're working on. I told you earlier, I always point out to people what's in the background, and so I'm not going to bring it up now because you'll probably bring it into the story that the bear that we see back there has got a story behind him or her. I never know, you know, you see a stuffed animal, whether it's him or her. So let's just go ahead and get started with a few of the questions that we've actually already talked about and given to you. Tell us just a little bit about your past, just kind of where you grew up, what's kind of led you to where you are today. Just take as much time as you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, well, you know, I've had a pretty wild life experience already. I was born homeless in Denver in a midwife's bed, and lived slightly after that. Once we finally got a home, we were hanging out in the ghetto down in Denver for the first a few months of my life, and then moved to Boulder eventually, and probably around 9 months old, and then I grew up here. Boulder's a really great place to grow up, especially when you kind of live in the lower end of the economic scale. So, you know, I was raised by an amazing single mom who, you know, played every role and did just an amazing job of, you know, taking care of us with limited resources. So, so yeah, Boulder was an amazing place to grow up. I definitely, you know, had some more kind of difficult experiences as a teen, and, you know, going through just the teenage thing, and, you know, getting into drugs and alcohol and trouble and all sorts of kind of, you know, the things that especially when you grow up in a lower economic scale, you're just exposed to it more often. So, of course, I'm in Boulder, you don't have as much of that as you would in some of the more kind of intense areas in the country or even in the world, but definitely got to experience, you know, a small taste of some very big issues that not only our youth but we face as a whole community. So although I haven't been, I didn't grow up homeless my whole life, but I had a flavor of it. And the drugs and alcohol took hold for a few years of my life as a teenager, but they never ruined my life. But I definitely have these these tastes, these flavors that run throughout my whole life experience that really helps me connect with people who are suffering, and and then of course ordinary people too who suffer all the time, whether it be looking, not being okay where we are, always wanting something beyond what we have right now, the ordinary day-to-day suffering of people in our lives passing away, or life circumstances changing, or jobs being lost, all that kind of normal suffering.
So tell me, you said we a couple times as you talked about your mother raising you. So you have brothers and sisters, or at least one, it sounds like.
Well, I have a half-sister, but we never grew up together. But my mom and I were really, a team. I mean, we had to be. It was just us kind of against the world, and trying to figure out, we don't have a whole bunch of extended family or a whole bunch of other, we didn't have a really close-knit system of family in the area. So my mom became really resourceful, and I often joke that I'm going to eventually write a book called Raised by a Pack of Lesbians, because it seemed that, I don't know why, there were all these lesbians that just stepped in. I didn't have a father figure around, but these couples would come in and just kind of, become surrogate mothers and, also play that masculine role. So, that was my community growing up. It was like this whole clan of really wild women.
And where's your mother at today? Is she still in the area physically and still in your life, kind of?
Oh, yeah, she's in Boulder, and I can get into it a little more about all the global peace train processes and stuff, but I work with her in some of this work, and she's been an avid volunteer for us for since the beginning, and we're very close. I mean, of course, we have our ups and downs like any family, and sometimes we put on our boxing gloves and go at it in a argument or whatever, but we both have a lot of love and respect for each other, so I'm very fortunate.
Let's stay in your youth just a little way, and this is a question that I said I'd ask. If it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon and you're 15 years old and you don't have any things you have to be doing, so you can be doing your own thing, what would we find Aja doing? What would you be up to?
Well, that was right in the midst of my challenging years, so I'd probably be waking up late, and then I had this weird kind of thing. I would go out and I'd hang out with friends and I'd party and I'd have all this fun, but I was like a super, into school and always like super obsessed at getting straight A's and, being really good at school. So although I was having kind of this parallel, experience of like the good girl and the bad girl all at once, So that was probably, on a Saturday afternoon, I'd probably be waking up late and then going out to hang out with friends at parks or, just around Boulder and enjoy the nature here. We did that a lot. We'd go up in the mountains, we'd take drives, and eventually we'd come to some sort of trouble or something outrageous like streaking on the hill or, doing things that you could get in a lot of trouble for if you were caught. And, but they were always kind of harmless to others, but more kind of prank-oriented and, fun in that way.
Well, let's transition to the present and talk about what you're doing now by changing the question and say, okay, now it's a beautiful Saturday or Sunday. You just talked about a trip to the mountains, afternoon, and again, let's say you're at home, so you're not on the road somewhere, and again, you don't have other responsibilities. You're just going to go out and do something you want to be doing. What would you be doing?
So present day, I love being in nature, and I love spending time with my dog. Like, I have this amazing little Papillon Chihuahua mix. She's also turning into one of the Global Peace Train characters, and so we hang out a lot, and I love doing training with her. She's like an agility dog, and we do all sorts of kind of fun things and love being outside. So, you know, we'd probably go outside and just, something I love to do is find a beautiful spot just to sit and relax and let my mind just, you know, let go, really let go. You know, I mean, I've been trained in a lot of formal forms of meditation and things, and, you know, there's some forms where you know, follow your breath or all these different kind of structures, but, you know, something that I find so relaxing and so good for my system is just to get out in nature and then fully let go over a beautiful view. And that means let go of form, let go of, you know, attachment to work or thoughts, and then also letting go of the attachment to letting go. So that means, like, you know, if I start thinking of something, not being like, oh, stop thinking. Like some forms of meditation, you know, they're like, don't think. So it's really like this form of really, really relaxing, and I think I definitely need that in our day and age. I think a lot of people do, and we kind of skip over that. So yeah, that's, you know, sky gazing, looking at the sky. Same as when I was a kid, you know, like watching the clouds. Or
And I do know you live in a pretty neat spot, and so it's pretty easy to go outside and do that. I know one day you shared a little video that you had done, so I know you can have a nice playful side too, because you made this video of if I'm remembering right, sort of a linkage of things that you could. It was very cool, and I know you do a little bit of that also. Have fun with that.
Oh yeah, I make lots of videos, and you know, I have to rest because I love my work so much that I can get, you know, kind of overly intense on it. So so I have to take that time to rest. But making videos and interviewing people on video and doing all the work that I do with Global Peace Train it's like, it feeds my soul. I'm very fortunate in that, you know, I've been in front of the camera a lot, but I get to now be behind the camera and start seeing these beautiful, amazing stories coming out of, you know, what we would call ordinary people. But we all, you know, again, we all have these amazing, amazing stories, even as just like ordinary beings. And so I'm getting to see like these characters come out of people and their wisdom and their creativity and their playfulness. And, you know, I'm so fortunate. I'm just shocked. Over and over, I'm shocked at the immense beauty of others and of people's hearts as they start to kind of peel open and, you know, reveal their true selves. So.
Very cool. One last question, sort of back in time. Is there a person, let's say other than your mother, because you talked about your mother in terms of her impact, and that's awesome that you had, even in face of adversity, you ended up having an amazing relationship with her. You know, I actually thought of one question. Do you guys talk about the past at all, to where she shares with you about how she felt when you were going through that rebellious time that you talked about and such, and how does she reflect on that now? That's not the question I was going to ask. I'm going to ask another one in a minute. But what's your thought? Do you guys? How did she handle that time?
Well, you know, I was just out of control. You know, she always said I was like 10 kids in one growing up, and so I just had the energy of 10. And she had the energy of 1 and a single mom and just, you know, doing everything. So, so yeah, in that time of my teenage years, she just was like, at some point she was just pulling out her hair, you know, just like trying everything. I remember going into her room and seeing all her like, her like help your teen books all lined up. You know, she was like reading every single thing she could possibly get her hands on to try to figure out how to handle this like ball of fire that was just out of control.
So now the question I was going to ask, a person other than your mother that influenced you in your life in a positive way from, let's say, high school and, you know, back. So not post-high school, but during that time.
You know, the one person that I think of, I just think back to, I think I was in 4th or 5th grade. It may have started a little earlier, actually, 3rd, 4th, 5th, something like that. And there was this wonderful guy who was the librarian at my school at Uni Hill here in Boulder. And, you know, I don't remember his name, but because I didn't have any, like, male energy around my life, I had all these, like, women. the adult male kind of energy that was supportive was amazing, you know. So he was one, there's two I want to mention, but he was one in the early years that was kind of, you know, more on the peripheral. And he, I remember I loved mathematics so much, and I was so bored by the regular math that I was doing, even though I was in, like, the accelerated, you know, they had these special groups they would send you to and stuff. But I was still just, like, I was aching for it. And I went to the library, and I was like, I want to learn algebra. Like, hey, will you help me learn algebra? And he's like, sure, let's go over to the encyclopedia. And, like, we went over to the encyclopedia, and we started, like, looking through to figure out, you know, like self-teaching myself algebra. And then he was so sweet. He was like, well, yeah, I'll write you out some algebra problems, and you can take them home. And, you know, so we had, like, this informal homework situation where I would just, like, you know, was learning these amazing things about numbers that that's where my passion was. So he was so kind. And I remember, you know, that was so impactful. And at some point he said one thing that carried on for a very long time in my life. He was just like, you know, you should be an engineer. Maybe you love math. Maybe you should be an engineer. And so that you know, that stuck with me for a very, very long time. And even after, like, high school, I started exploring, you know, doing astrophysics and doing engineering at CU. So
you're seeing a bunch of motion by me because we had the air conditioner on in our studio here, and we tried to remember to turn it off, and we had forgotten today. So it's quieter here now without the air conditioning being on. So you said a second person, but before you go to the second person, I want to use that story because you said I don't remember his name today. The reason that I ask people these questions is to help those of you listening to learn from them and to see that, you know what, you could be that person. You could be that librarian, that here we have an amazing woman today, years later, that remembers him, doesn't necessarily remember the name even, but he obviously had an impact on your life. So a little bit of a message to our audience to think about that, because you're potentially doing that to people. But now I'm going to throw one out for you, Aja. A suggestion, and this didn't come from me, but it's one that I'm trying to do, and I have not developed a good habit with it yet. But I heard a speaker at a conference that I was at earlier this year, and I'm not remembering his name right now. I'll probably think of it, and I'll throw it in. But he said one of the most impactful things that I'm doing in my life, and I've been doing it for about the last 2 or 3 years, and this is a very successful guy in the real estate realm, actually, is that I take the time every day to write one handwritten note to send in the mail to somebody in my life that probably will get it and go, oh my gosh, you know, maybe they wouldn't even know who it's coming from until they read it and they realize what it is and why that I'm just saying thank you and I'm just writing it. And so he says he does it every day. Well, I've tried to do it after that, and it hasn't been every day for sure. But I'm going to give a suggestion. Maybe try to use Google or whatever, find this guy and send him a letter. I would bet that just as impactful as you've been on, or as he's been on your life, maybe that little letter would have some impact on his too. So.
Yeah, you know, I do something similar, but I don't do it in, it's a little more time consuming. I don't do it in written form. I make videos for people, and they're pretty, you know, private. Like I'll dress up in character, like my red-nosed clown character, for example, and send like a birthday message. But that is very well, you know, it can take a long time to put one of those videos together. It can take like 8 hours to do the editing, and then there's the shooting, and you know. Yeah. But when I've offered those videos to people, you know, it moves them to tears because there's like so much intentionality and you know, just heart. You put your heart into something and say thank you and say how much you appreciate someone, and yeah, it makes an impact.
Cool. So there's a second person. So I want to make sure you brought, and you didn't say the name. So go to that person.
Yeah, well, this is kind of a good natural segue. My mom's best friend, you know, my whole life. I think he met me when I was about 3 weeks old. So he's known me literally my whole life. And, you know, in the beginning, I just called him Uncle Dan. You know, my mom and him dated before I was ever born, but then they just became best friends. And he became kind of this surrogate father figure to me, even, you know, just he'd go to my gymnastics meets, he'd go to my school things, you know, he just showed up in the way that a normal father would, even though we never lived together or anything. And eventually, over the years, he became Uncle Daddy Dan. And so that's still what I call him, is Uncle Daddy Dan. And, you know, the reason it's a good segue, it relates to the bear back here. He's actually the very first train engineer on the Global Peace Train. He's and there's a very kind of auspicious and beautiful story around how that came to be.
So let's use that as the transition. Why don't you now tell us, and Brian will probably put some slides on for you, about the Global Peace Train, kind of what led you to it maybe, and you just started to give that story, what it is, what it's doing, and then hopefully that'll prompt some other questions that I'll have and maybe our audience will have.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Global Peace Train is something that, you know, I like to think of it from so many different angles because there's so much wisdom packed into one small image of this train. And you can even trace it back over the years through music and all of these people singing about this peace train, you know, Cat Stevens, the peace train's coming, or, you know, there's another beautiful song from, I think, the 50s or 60s called People Get Ready, you know, there's a train coming. And, you know, really the essence of that is, yeah, like, let's bring peace into the world. And whatever that looks like, of course, in the outer way of, you know, dealing with extreme suffering in war zones and the things that are going on, you know, in our world on the massive scale, and then on a more close to home scale, just within our own communities, you know, within our family structures, and then of course close in is like bringing peace to ourselves and what that looks like, peace of mind, you know, and to be able to share that with others, you know, and of course the word love is always overused a little bit in the New Age world, but yeah, it's the train is just a representation of bringing love into the world and what that looks like. So, you know, there's some very kind of real things that the Global Peace Train does. So you can imagine it like a real train, and each train car has a different community that it serves. Either, like we have one up on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. We've had other projects in Kenya, in the slums there, or down in Argentina in the slums down there. So, you know, it either represents a community, one train car will focus on, like, Lakota people, or it'll focus on an issue that people have, like homelessness, which is also a community. It's a global community. There are homeless people all over the world. So it's either a topic or a community. And, and there are two types of kind of people that are on the train. There are people that are actually riding the train, that have become characters on this train, that are like, yes, I'm here to help the world, and I'm here to serve with my gifts, and I'm here to make the world a better place. And those people have all done a certain level of kind of personal development where, you know, they're taking good care of themselves, you know, and they're ready to, it's the cup overflowing model, rather than we see in a lot of nonprofits, this people come into it, they want to help, but they haven't even, like, taken care of themselves all the way yet. And so they're kind of giving and then, you know, at their own expense, you know. So we see that a lot over and over. So those are the people that are on the train. It's really their lives are full. They've made some progress in, you know, finding their own inner peace, and then are ready to offer and give back to the world. And then there are the people that I call messengers, who are coming to the train, and, you know, we all belong to some kind of community, whether we know it or not. You know, a family, that's one, you know, a location, but then, you know, anything that we've struggled with that we can connect with other people around, or any passion that we have that we can connect with other people. So, you know, People who have been homeless, they can all communicate together and have some natural understanding. People who all belong to the Lakota tribe, they have some natural understanding. People who all love environmental, sustainability, they all have something in common. So these messengers come to the train and they say, hey, like, we need help, please come and help us. And so then the train engineer will be like, okay, let's go to this place, and there's a whole kind of series of things that happen to create a new train car to then be able to deliver and serve those populations. So that's kind of like a big overarching view of it and kind of the realistic, side of things. But there's this really playful, fun, imaginative side of things where people actually become characters. And we do that by, there's a few different methods, but one of my favorites is we have people actually split out these characters in themselves that represent the light and dark aspects of themselves. And then they start playing out what those light and dark aspects are in full costume, and we do it in front of the video camera so that we can start telling the story from the beginning. And eventually, through these video interviews, we get this whole elaborate storyline of these characters coming together and battling to the death. And then we put these characters into cartoons so that the characters can battle to the death in the cartoon, and then an integrated character emerges from this kind of transformative process. And it can take a long time depending on how much, how fast somebody works internally and is ready for this work, But what the outcome is so fun and playful because we get to see these characters that then enter into the cartoon worlds and start telling these amazing stories of transformation, that are very personal, and at the same time, everyone, we're all human, and so they have this human element that people can connect with and be inspired by.
So in practicality, you've talked about the activities. Give us a story of one or more specific interactions of doing the kinds of things that the Soul Train, the Peace Train, is doing.
Yeah.
So just talk about one or more stories that way.
Yeah. Well, working up on Pine Ridge is one of the best. We've been up there for about 5 years, and we've built them an e-commerce site, because Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is one of the most impoverished areas in the U.S. Like, some of our women up there don't have running water, like they don't have heat. There's like 10 people living in a tiny little 1-bedroom shack. Like, it's like a third world country right here in the U.S. And we call it behind the buckskin curtain. Like, these people live behind that, where the regular world can't see what's going on behind this curtain. And so initially we came, really wanting to help reinforce some of their traditions that have been, slowly dying out over, the course of this whole, time of white people coming in and telling them how they're going to live their lives. It's the same with most Aboriginal tribes all around the world of, a population coming in, mostly European, and saying, hey, you're going to go to Catholic school, and you can't practice your traditions anymore, and if you do, we're throwing you in jail, and there's this oppression. And so we went in looking at, okay, how can we create some economic value and also help strengthen some of these traditions that are in, could be lost within our lifetime. And so we created the Tribal Traditions of the Lakota Sioux e-commerce website where people can actually buy some of their traditional, like, baby moccasins or star quilts. And the star quilts are really like this amazing teaching from the Lakota people. They're so impoverished up there. I mean, the worst in the U.S., and yet this symbol of generosity of the star quilt is unparalleled. I've never really seen a community that's so, struggling so much, but they will offer their last dollar to, the homeless guy on the corner, even when they're like, just, every day they face hardship. And so the star quilts are the symbol of generosity, where they're offered and they're gifted at different times to honor people. And it's considered one of the greatest honors in order to receive one of these star quilts. You know, you get one often when you've accomplished something great. You know, a lot of the youth will get them when they graduate because they don't have a great success of graduating up on the reservation. A lot of the youth are committing suicide, and it's a struggle just to get through high school. And even then, once you get through high school, you may not be able to read and write, and you can't get into traditional colleges. You know, it's a whole different ballgame. So, you know, often the kids will get one when they graduate. When babies are born, they often get them. They actually have the Lakota language is so beautiful, and I don't know much of you know, I don't know how to speak it yet, but I hope to learn more and more. They call children precious gifts. Like, that's the word for child, is a precious gift, which I just think is so appropriate. So anyway, you know, children will get them right when they're born, graduations, marriages, funerals, or great accomplishments, or great acts of generosity will then receive a star quilt on the other side of, like, thank you for helping, or, you know, being there.
On the star quilt, real quick, you might have said it and I missed it. Is it a quilt that's made by an individual? A lot of times quilting is a community act, and people will get together and quilt together. Is it an individual that makes the quilt, or is it more of a community act?
Well, you know, what's happening up there is the grandmothers they're the only ones left that really know how to make these. And so they're really trying to make it more communal, where their kids come and help. You know, they set these huge quilt stands up in their living rooms, and, you know, that might be like their whole house pretty much. So they have this quilt stand that takes up their whole house, and there isn't much to do up there. There are no jobs. Like, they live out in the middle of nowhere, just like a big open wide field. And yeah, so a lot of the kids are starting to learn and help, and, you know, simply out of, I think, even boredom, but then there's some interest also that starts to manifest, and then they realize, oh, there is even a possible way for me to make money by learning this skill. And, you know, which up there is really hard to find because there are no jobs. There's just no hope for the youth. You know, they see their parents living in poverty, and, you know, they just commit suicide. They just don't see any hope for their people or their future. So, yeah, it's a big problem.
So that's a great story and great activity on the part of the Global Peace Train. So let's move ahead now. Tell us about the current status. I know you have some projects that you're working on. What are the goals that you have for the Global Peace Train moving ahead? What are the next things that you're going to be doing?
Well, this is a big year for us because, you know, initially when I started this organization in 2009, I had this sense of the playfulness and the cartoons and the video media that was going to help express this message to the world, and share people's wisdom, you know, across all the cultures. And you know, and it's taken this long for, you know, I had to build enough kind of foundational work and prove that the nonprofit kind of logistics and that you can help a population, and, you know, I had to prove these kinds of things, that this model works. And so now this year we're finally getting these final cartoons will be launched in the next month or two. The first ones will start rolling out, which start to explain the story and unveil the story in a really you know, intentional way to guide people along the story with us and create opportunities for them to be able to participate in whatever way they want. If they want to become a character, there's an opportunity for them to become characters. If they want to play a character that's already existing, like some of the, if people have seen some of the photos going up, there's like a deer and a hedgehog, and there are some of these characters that, as they're developed through community storytelling. So the more that people play these characters, the more kind of power they get. So somebody can start to play the deer, and then they can lead a whole bunch of deer down the deer path, you know, in through this cartoon world. And so it's kind of a way, you know, those characters that are already set are a way for people to actually start experiencing kind of the online storytelling aspects, but also getting out in the real world and starting to have an impact. That's something I get so frustrated about a lot of documentaries and things is, you know, you get all this information that comes at you, you know, like, oh, look at this big problem in the world, it's horrible, and, you know, and then the documentary is over and you just feel horrible and you don't know how to help. You feel helpless. You know, they're like, oh, you can donate money to this organization, but even that, it's like, it's lacking some kind of inherent meaning and of like in our nature when you want to actually help and extend and give part of yourself to help some of these big problems of the world. You know, there isn't kind of a clear pathway for that. And so Global Peace Train is really about creating that pathway for people to follow their interests and which communities they feel a connection with and figure out how to help and how to give to others. Because really, you know, that's where happiness and peace of mind comes, is when we're no longer kind of grasping to ourself and our constant like, oh my God, am I okay? Am I, you know, hoarding my resources? And you know, when there's like this freedom and you actually help others, and you know, you see someone on the street that is suffering and you offer, you know, whatever it is, a smile, a hand, a dollar, you know, kindness. And I think that's where really that's the fabric of change that the Global Peace Train is, you know, teaching, is that kind of compassion, learning to have compassion for others, and then to share our gifts and follow that, you know, that compassion to create change in the world.
And how can our audience here help with that? What is it that right now you're looking for that you could get some assistance with?
Well, you know, that's always such a good question, because it can be hard to know exactly what's needed until it shows up right in your face, you know. I feel like every step we have, every tiny little step, you know, this whole big vision is broken down into, you know, daily tasks, everyday steps. And, you know, really, you know, what the Global Peace Train needs now is those leaders and those people who know that they were born to help the world in whatever way that they feel they are here to help, to become characters on the train and go through this kind of process in order to actually arrive as an animated character on the train and then be able to go and start serving, you know, others and different communities as we start to, you know, as this train is just, it feels like it's just hitting the ground. And as we're starting to go to more and more and more communities and have more and more impact, you know, those initial leaders that are on the train are going to be the pioneers of, you know, the systems that are sustainable. And so, like up on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, for example, we're in phase 3 of 5, I believe, of a research project, which is a pretty big research project looking at what makes the people happy, what makes the Lakota people happy. And so I think this is kind of another key element in bringing benefit to others, is really looking at, okay, what's going to make them happy? You know, so many nonprofits go to a place and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys need this, 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 and this. And they go in and they deliver those things, and the culture starts to change, and you know, even more struggle or, you know, problems occur that you couldn't even imagine. And so this kind of going into a community and then being able to say, hey, what do you need? What do you love? What makes you happy? And then do it in a very formal scientific way, so that we can then take the data and say, oh, this community finds these things make them happiest, so let's deliver those things, you know?
Very cool. And as we look towards the much nearer term, I know you have some interests, at least in marketing. You and I have talked about that. What are you going to be doing to make the world more aware of the Global Peace Train?
Well, you know, I've had a lot of different experiences in my life with businesses growing too fast or too slow. And I'm really looking for that sweet spot right now. So I haven't started much active marketing right now. It's all word of mouth. And I think there's something that's really beautiful with that word of mouth that is starting to happen. It's a very organic kind of growth. And we just had our first Global Peace Train event, live event in person, in July, with one of the characters that is starting to come out into the Global Peace Train storyline. And he's a beautiful artist. He's self-taught, painting mostly, but he also has other mediums. And there's a beautiful story. When I first met him, we were just at a gathering on New Year's, actually, a year and a half ago. And I had this hat that I had bought in India. And I had been, because I do character work for all these characters on the train, sometimes I know there are some characters that are going to exist on the train, like Santa Claus. I mean, that's just an obvious one. Like, Santa Claus has to be on the train. There has to be that version that people can play Santa Claus and have that experience. And so I've been looking all over the world, and I always had this awareness, like, okay, who's Santa Claus? Who's going to be the first Santa? Where is he? And on New Year's, Steven is the artist, he just turned this hat inside out and put it on, and it was a Santa hat. It was shocking. I was like, oh my gosh, you're Santa. And he's like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, like, whatever. And I was like, well, I know you don't really know what this means right now, but are you willing to take on the role of the first Santa Claus? And that means you can't leave this system until you've handed that on to someone else. Like, it's a big responsibility, and you don't even know what that entails right now. And at the time, I didn't even know what all it would entail either. And he was like, yeah, totally, I'll do it. So we did his first interview on video about 3 weeks later, maybe a month. And it comes out that in the time between when he got the hat to when we did the first interview, he had started doing art. And he had never done art in his whole life. But he just, started doing these pastels and all these different drawings and these paintings. And in that first interview, we started to divide out his light and dark characters, so Santa being his light character and a character named Supertramp being his dark character. And then a year and a half went by, and this happens with a lot of characters, is they'll start their processes, but until they're really ready for the next step, they kind of go dormant. And a year and a half later, sure enough, he's like, I'm ready for my next thing, like, let's get together. So we do another video interview, and this whole story starts to come out about this show that he's doing. And so we actually, Global Peace Train, collaborated with him for his debut art show in Denver at City Hall. It was a big event. There were like 1,500 people that came through, and there were probably 50 different artists. And we helped brand him in that he has MS, and he struggles a lot with his body and his health. And he was also living on the floor of his art studio, and he lives in what him and I kind of coined at this point as abundant poverty. It seems like he has everything he needs whenever he needs it, but yet he struggles to pay his bills, and he had no car, and he was living out in the middle of nowhere. And so we helped brand him in this art show, and it turns out that his art will never be for sale. It'll always only be gifted. And it was a big transition internally for him to come to that, and for us to align the messaging of what it means to give, of yourself freely without expectation, and then to also start looking at, how giving your gifts to the world without expectation can actually bring back more and more benefit. And so we saw in that one event, we were the most successful booth in the whole place. We had a line most of the night, and we designed it to have a very, very gentle and beautiful, like, serendipitous feeling. So you had to, in order to be able to visit his booth, you had to have one of the beautiful handmade Global Peace Train tickets. And we really put a lot of time into each ticket, where we took this handmade paper that was like, it's super beautiful and takes so much time to put, and we burned the edges, and then we stitched it together with thread, and then we put a wax seal over the top, and then inside we put the Global Peace Train ticket. And when people would come to this event, they would have to have the password, and so that password would go out to, like, my community, all word of mouth, before the event. And when they showed up at the event, they would go find the first character, and the first character was the deer. And she was in full face paint, and she's dressed as a deer in one of the custom-made, handmade pieces of clothing that we designed for this whole project. It's that's kind of a whole other sideline, is kind of the custom-made clothing that goes in this whole process. But anyway, so they would find the deer in this face paint, and she was just wandering, so they had no idea where she was in 1,500 people. They'd find her, and they'd give her the password, and she would give them a ticket. And then the rest of the night, she was just wandering around talking to people, and when she felt a connection or somebody that would really appreciate or had that kind of spark of compassion, she would give them a ticket and say, yeah, you can go down and enjoy this experience. And so Stephen took the time, we had this line, people would bring their ticket, and one by one they would go up and spend time with him, and he'd ask which painting they loved, and and then he'd gift it to them. And in return, there was no expectation, but they could, if they wanted, to either give money or give a resource or give anything back. So it was a way to inspire generosity going both ways. And what we saw is, with that one event, we got him a car. We got him it's an old beater, but he had no car. He couldn't get around to get groceries and stuff. We got him, some cash that came in, and then we got him a $2,500 bed donated. That he really needed that for his body and for his health. And so, all in one event, there was just so much that came back from his just opening and gifting. And go ahead.
Oh, what a very, very cool story.
Yeah. And so these are the types of events that we're going to be doing more and more. As more characters come out, it's not just going to be him, but there are more and more characters. When they're ready to kind of reveal their hearts and their characters, there's this really kind of fun way that we have them come out in the real world and start doing these events. And then people get these personal invites, and you have to have one of those magic tickets. It's kind of like Willy Wonka. It's the Willy Wonka way. Get a magic ticket and then, come aboard.
Very cool. Well, we're getting down to maybe our last 10 or so minutes here, and I have a few other questions I wanted to ask, and we'll tie them into Global Priest Train. I know that I'd ask you in advance if there was a quote that you can remember that's on your heart that just means a lot to you, and I think you gave us one. So what is that quote, and who does it come from, and why is it significant to you?
Well, I don't want to butcher it. I think I put it in an email to you guys, but it comes from this guy named Garchung Rinpoche, who, this guy is amazing. He spent, in Tibet, he was part of the traditional Tibetan culture. He's probably in his 80s now. And he spent his, when the Chinese came in, they threw him in prison. And he spent, his main adult life in prison, in this Chinese prison. And he continued to really work on learning compassion, which is kind of the core values of that culture, in the Tibetan culture, is learning compassion and then learning how to overcome suffering. And he's the only person I've ever heard in real life that says, I may not know so much about everything, but I know that I no longer suffer, and I can teach you how to do that. And I think that's a pretty bold statement, and to actually, like, when somebody says that, of course you start thinking, like, does that person really not suffer? But he has that quality. You look at him and you really understand and believe that that is true. And he says, the only cause of happiness is love and compassion, and the only cause of suffering is self-grasping. And what that means is, basically when our mind is constantly consumed with attaching to thinking about ourselves and, who's pissing us off, why the traffic is holding us up, what we need next, how we're gonna survive, how we're gonna take care of ourselves, like these really intense kind of obsessive things that we constantly think about, how we're gonna finally get to be happy. Once that kind of line of thinking is replaced then by, like, oh, may this action, whatever I'm doing, may this drink that I'm drinking benefit all beings, whatever that means, so that every thought that you have, or every action you take, actually becomes in alignment for the benefit of all beings. I mean, it's a pretty radical and amazing way to think, and if you can actually align your life like that, that's where happiness and love come from, is, is there.
Great. How about another one that I ask, and is there a book that you've either read recently or that you're currently reading that you can remember that had some good impact on you that you would recommend to our audience?
Yeah, I always go back to some of my favorites. I've been reading a lot of different books, and especially books about women, women who have had immense impact in the world, because we haven't seen much of that coming out. It's like you get so many stories and so much information about all these great men in the world, Gandhi or Martin Luther King, or like just these amazing people. And I think the women's voice has been, hidden a little bit from our view. And so I do read a lot of books that kind of highlight, from lots of different traditions, powerful women. But when you ask about a specific book, the one that always comes to mind is The Giving Tree, because it's one of those classic books. It's a children's book, but it holds the essence of what I think I've been talking about most of the day, is really how to create this kind of compassion. And there's a really poignant message in it. So yeah, The Giving Tree. Read it to your kids.
Which is a good segue. Giving is good, as we all know, and the old adage, it's better to give than receive. But sometimes life doesn't give us everything good. And so another question that I have is, what if you can think of an event in your life that at the time it happened was not very good, and as you look back on it now, it actually ended up creating something positive. So it was a negative at the time, but now you go back, and if you could tell us what that is, and so we can gain from it, because we will.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, the most obvious is always breakups, whenever those happen, of like long-term relationships. And when it's happening, you're just consumed with pain and suffering, and it can be really hard to see what is possibly good about that situation. But I often like to, and it's within any ending, any, being fired or not getting a job that you think you're going to, or any of those things, where, I try in the time that I'm going through it to really look, okay, like, where's my opportunity in this suffering? Like, okay, this is teaching me some kind of lesson right now and creating some opportunity for me to grow. And I can either just suffer through it, and then maybe it'll happen again down the road, and I'll have to learn the lesson then. Or, like, how can I, like, look at this and take this experience in order to transform myself and grow? And so, breakups are just so so obvious, and of that suffering, of because you put so much blame on the other person. But then I think that our world mirrors to us a lot of our own internal world. So the outer world is showing us what's going on in here too. And when we're actually able to see clearly out there without blame and without too much judgment, and we go, okay, so that's what's going on out there. Where am I creating that in myself that is making that happen in my world? And, that's how I always get through those kinds of situations, even when they're, super painful. Even at those times, I have a video journal that I keep. And I have I like to pull out my video journal every time I'm, like, at my worst. And I set up the video camera, and I look for the wisdom in that emotional experience that I'm having. If I'm crying, or if I'm, feeling really disconnected, or whatever it is that I'm feeling, that I think, oh, this is the worst that I've felt in a really long time. I pull out that camera, and then I start talking to myself and trying to unpack what's going on. And what I find is this immense, if I'm actually honest, there's this wisdom and these beautiful, even if there's just confusion that shows up. When I watch those videos back, I'm like, oh, like that's what was going on, and I love tracking that story for myself so that I can, you know, grow and learn and maybe eventually even share those really intense experiences I've had that are all captured on camera with others so that they can also move through whatever they're going through.
That is really great. Just a little bit of the anal side of me. How long have you been doing that video journal for yourself?
Oh gosh, since 2008.
Wow. Yeah. And how do you have a length of time that you do a snippet when you do it? And the reason is that there are some softwares out there now, apps and such. I can't remember the name of it. One of them that where it literally, it even prompts you daily, and I think it does a 5-second video. And they've proven that if you keep that kind of a record over time, that it will greatly enhance your ability to remember your past, and you can recall things amazingly. So I'm just curious, do you have a sequence or a way that you do it?
Yeah, you know, I try to keep it pretty consistent. I do it every month. In times of hardship, I do it more because it's a way for me to help, you know, I mean, you can turn out to the outer world, and of course it's important to have a team of, like, you know, friends or therapists or whatever you need to get through something difficult, but really no one can change that situation for me other than myself. And so in those times of hardship, gosh, sometimes I pull that video camera out, you know, 2 or 3 times a day, even when, like, and it varies. Sometimes I'll be feeling good and just average and just kind of doing an update. But every time I get into those extremes of, you know, the darkest parts of my human experience, I feel it's really important for me to document those. Because in our culture, you know, we hide the dark from everyone, and we hide the dark from ourselves. And that part of us that we've kind of shut out is actually a very important part of our kind of healing and coming together to be a whole person. And it's human. Like, we hide these parts, but it's just an inherent human experience to feel sadness or anger or despair. And, you know, and so if eventually when and if this stuff ever comes out to others, that's my only wish, is that, you know, they can say, oh gosh, okay, like Aja's had this wild life or whatever, and she seems this way, but, like, oh, that she's a human, you know, just like all of us, and have some little bit of wisdom to be able to help people through difficulty, you know.
Very cool. Well, we're coming up against it here, time-wise. We like to be pretty disciplined so that our audience knows. You do have a question out here, and it's a funny one, I think, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Maybe you see it on your screen. But this is from one of our longtime watchers, Mark, who says, what's the greatest mystery in astrophysics for you? And I don't know whether that was coming from something he heard you say that I missed or what. But if
yeah,
you want to answer that'd be a...
I am a total astrophysics nerd. I mean, that's what I was going to, you know, I was studying that in school, and I love outer space. I love the stars. I love all of it. You know, and I think there's a lot of places that are that's a whole huge conversation. But
Mark's from Bangladesh, so someday I'll have him when we'll Skype sometime, and we'll let you have that conversation with him.
Cool.
Go ahead. Keep going.
I would just put it at one little speck of thing that I contemplate often. Many mystic traditions talk about the event horizon being a place where you come up against, you basically cross over into your enlightenment. So you approach your event horizon, and then you're enlightened. And, you know, there's a whole thing around that of, like, oh, when you get there, maybe nothing happens other than you just open, and you're open forever. You know, people get confused that, like, the event horizon and then that experience of enlightenment is just so, like, it's like the Big Bang, like, boom, you know. But we also call in astrophysics the black holes, you know. We call that the edge of the black hole, where the outer and the inner world meet, the event horizon. So where things are basically, you know, being sucked into these black holes and then crossing over into the unknown. And, I contemplate that a lot, and I have a lot of ideas and thoughts about that, but since we're out of time, we'll have to save that for another time.
Mark, there you go. We can connect you to Asia at some point. You guys can talk about that. That's actually intriguing to me, too. Well, I have one last question. I finish all these webinars with this one, and it really is one that we're going to compile sort of a video of all, like everybody's answers to this question. But before I get to that, Asia, is there anything else you'd like to specifically tell us about how, again, I asked you already how we can help. I've put up the globalpeacetrain.org website here. I'm assuming people can go there. If they've got questions or anything, they can reach out to you. But anything else you'd like to throw out before I ask a last question?
Yeah, sure. So globalpeacetrain.org has just our landing page, and if you want to get get in the loop and start getting some of these personal invites, you can just sign up your name and email, and we'll put you on that list to, it's a small list, and we're really, protecting it and making sure that it's the right people. So we're really looking for the people who have big hearts and who know that they're here to impact the world. So if that's you, you can track us there. And then if you really are like, oh my gosh, I want to become one of these characters. I don't know much about it because we didn't get to go all the way into it. But there's one starting place that I lead people, which is to globalpeacetrain.org/test1. And that's a hidden page from the regular world, and it's a 10-minute questionnaire that basically gets people started on looking at, what character process they're ready for. And so, yeah, if you're into checking out that process and becoming one of the characters on the train, then you can head over there.
Well, that's globalpeacetrain.org/test1.
Yep,
So,
and number 1, so it's just TEST1. Very simple.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, Mark said awesome, by the way, to your answer. So, last question. Let's pretend you woke up this morning and you knew you weren't where you were yesterday. You even had some conversations with those around you. You're not on Earth anymore, but you're in a place that's very much like Earth. It appears that all of your daily needs are taken care of. You don't have to worry about that. Everything looks a lot like Earth. You find you have $500 and you got a laptop, and that's really what you got. What are you going to do for the next 7 days?
I know it's probably not what most people would do, but I am like, my life purpose is not only to help others, but really to play, and to play in the world and whatever that looks like. So I would be out there just playing in that world, being in nature, exploring, seeing what's going on, following the serendipitous quality of things. I really wouldn't have much of an agenda other than to really see if I could explore and discover the little bit of magic that is in that world, because I know that definitely there's magic in this world, and it's often just slightly under the surface, and when I let go of my agendas, that's where I find it, And so that's what I would do, aimless wandering.
That doesn't sound aimless, really, but anyway, it's a great answer to finish this.
Do you feel deep down that you were born to help solve some of the big problems of the world, but that you're too small to help? Oh, I know that feeling too. It's so painful. Well, the good news is no one is too small to help. The Global Peace Train is coming, and it's picking up passengers who are ready to make the world a better place. At Global Peace Train, we unite big hearts with social change campaigns to help communities around the globe that are suffering. So if you're ready to meet our big-hearted team and become part of the solution to some of the world's biggest problems, then enter your name and information right here on this page, and we'll guide you on board.
The beginning.
has been and is a gift. Like, I've been blessed with this gift, and I can't not give it. Like, give it. It's like I'm in this position where I have, you look around me, I have everything, of course. But I have nothing. Like, I don't have things, a car and food all the time, but I have a gift I can give everybody. And that's all I want to do is give my art. Give it. So when I got the show, when I got the email, my mind went to money. And it was the 2 weeks I couldn't paint, couldn't do anything. And when it came to just giving it away, everything just started flowing. Everything. Then I got another show for a month. So it was like that gifting opened me up to receive. Okay, well, the setup will be art, hanging art on one side, all original pieces. And the other side will be Supertramp shit, because I'm selling Supertramp, but I'm giving away all my art, giving it away. You can give me something if you want. I need resources. It can be money, or it can be coupons for something, gift cards, whatever. I don't care, but I'm gonna sell the fuck out of Supertramp and give me away. I say you will have to go to my landing page on Global Peace Train and see what is needed in our community and gift as you feel, as you see fit. That's it. Gift. Pass it on. I mean, the most important thing is to take care of yourself. But the point of life is giving. Giving to people. Now it's gonna touch your heart. Like, how can somebody with nothing give everything? Well, how can you have everything and give nothing? Give of yourself freely without expectation. That's it.
Again, everybody, remember, it'll be 3 weeks now before we do our next one. Look for the replay for this. Tell all your friends about the replay. Share it with others. Give us some likes. Those of you on Periscope, thank you for hanging out with us. We'll sign off now and let Aja get back to playing and the rest of her day, and we'll play with the rest of ours. And thank you, everybody, for listening to us with Economics in Action.